Alright, so once we are over the rigging process, it is time to add some skinning to the mesh. Now, what to do? From the modify list, I have this model selected. I will use a skin modifier and skin. Now, basically, this skin is absolutely empty. You have to add the bones that will manipulate the mesh. So I'm just entering the envelope mode and looking for this bones add option, and from the dialog I will choose by layer, opening up the layers and adding the bones. Now as you notice that I don't add the tips. Okay, tips are not in the game. Tips are just the ending of the bones, so we are not really interested to having them in the skinning process. So I will select, and voila, here we go. We are instantly ready to adjust the envelopes. Now, okay, it is not that super nice, so I will just select envelope, okay, again, because this is the normal display mode. Sometimes it's stuck, so it happens. Now what you see, every bone has a tiny gray kind of a mid segment. Now when you are selecting this mid segment, it will show a kind of an aura, kind of a halo, some kind of a magnetic force around the bone, and this force is sticking the red vertices to the bone. So when the bone is actually starts moving, these vertices will travel with them. Now before we are doing any kind of change, we will check how these envelopes are doing their job and what we have as a fundamental starting point. So I will leave the skin now, and because we already have these controllers, we can use them quite easily. Now I will test to create a quick and simple test layout by Control H, and just let me quickly not layout, just let me quickly rotate around a couple items. So I'm curious how these things are working. um, okay, as I see, the neck is, it has a too much influence here at the neck when I'm moving the head. Okay, so that's not exactly perfect, it's too soft, I guess. And when I'm start moving the neck, okay, neck is quite cool. So the bottom part of the neck is quite cool. Let me see the back. That is also deforming nicely. My only problem is probably the head bone has a too strong influence, as you see. So for example, this area of the neck is belonging to the middle bone, to the neck bone, and not to the head. Okay, just let me reset these guys. So I'm selecting these and alt right click and transform to 0. Okay, this is our initial point. Now select the jaw and just quickly, yeah. Okay, so as you see, the jaw will be a quite demanding task to deal with, but right now I will just reset it. Left view, nice. Front view, nice. Okay, and to make it easier, I will set up a simple animation by turning on Alt key. N is the hotkey for that, and we'll resize the timeline. There's a chance that the capture will not show the command, the hotkey. So let me tell you that I'm holding down Control and Alt. Keep the cursor in the timeline, and if you are holding down the right mouse button and moving the mouse while you are holding down Control, Alt, and right mouse button and moving to this direction, you are shrinking the timeline. I will shrink it to 30 frames. That's far enough. Okay. If you are doing the opposite with the left mouse button, that recalculates the timeline from the 0 point. Okay, but in this case we only need this change. So at the frame at 5 I will rotate the head. So this will be a kind of clear rotation. Okay, and in local mode, to make it easier, I will add a band on top from 5 to 10. There will be a bend, okay, to check how these guys are just working. Okay, so it's going till this moment, and then it starts rotating around. Okay, now same with the neck. I will sit back these to the 0 point, so I'm shift selecting and shift dragging a key. Now I have this movement, and then it goes back, and I will just animate this guy with the same location. So it will be a view. That's fine. That's it, just simply rotating around the neck. Okay, as I see, there is some kind of a collapse, but that is just fine. Okay, now my problem is it actually starts it goes to the 15th frame, so I have to transfer by using shift. So I've transferred the 0 key to the 15th keyframe. So now the neck movement starts from 15 and performed till the 20. Okay, that's pretty much fine. Actually, the shoulder part is quite obvious, so the shoulder part will stick the bottom area. So if the neck is working properly, that also tells us that there's a high chance the other parts are working good as well. Okay, I'm turning off the animation, and let me just check it. So here is the envelope, and starting with the head envelope. Now my problem is, as you see, this this kind of a spread of this force is quite high, and of course I want to make sure that this upper lip is red, and the bottom will be joined with the jawbone. So what I can do is, actually I can select this envelope, this end of the envelope, and while keeping it only in the z-axis and the y-axis. So this is the orientation I'm moving. I don't use the x because x is actually breaking the symmetry. So I will keep it in this orientation, and I can also select it from the left view and working in the side. So sometimes it is easier if you're working in the side view, in the left view, for example. Now that little handle that shows a purple dot here, so the other end is easier to select. Now as you see, this tiny little dot is shown in purple. It's quite small, but it is there. The other one, because it's not active, it is shown in gray. So in this case, even if you select the dot, the gizmo will, the transform gizmo will be somewhere else. So don't be surprised when you're selecting the point, but the gizmo is in the middle of these cross sections. Now once you adjusted the orientation, in this case the good orientation is somewhat like this. Maybe we can extend it a little bit furthermore. We can just resize this overall fall off. Now you can select every point of the fall off. It could be a side point, it could be a top point. Actually, you're doing one thing: you're changing the diameter of this fall off. Now if you are going smaller and smaller, the hotspot, the inside diameter, will also shrink. Okay, so if you're moving forward, this inside is also shrinking. So be careful with that. Once you reach the point, then adjust the hotspot as well to move it slower, smaller, shrink it more, and then adjust the other parts accordingly. So I'm shrinking this area as well. Maybe it's just too much. Alright. Okay, somewhat. Oh, we don't have to be that cruel. Okay, that's nice. Okay, that's nice. I will keep it this way. Now here is the jaw part. Now the jaw part is a little bit, I have mixed feelings with the jaw because I don't want the jawbone manipulate the ears. Ears will belong to the head part. So I have to make some corrections. Shift S will hide away my controllers. Okay, so that's it. Returning back to the jawbone, just let me, in this time, in this case, just let me directly modify it and move it to the center. So the top point is selected and moved to the center. Now the other one also selected and moved to the center. Alright, left view, wireframe. It will be ended at the chin and placed somewhere close to the ear, but I'm very sure that the fall off could be smaller. Okay, here the fall off will be also smaller. Right, now don't forget, these bones are overlapping. So if you are changing the effect, the region, this kind of force around the bone, then it gives room for the other bones, because the vertices and the meshes are sharing these forces. So when I'm reducing the effect area of the jaw, that will also give some room for the others as well. Now as you see, the volume and the influence of the neck bone is increased, so I will just go through and slightly remove it. Now when I have this ear out of range, that will bring us something new because the head bone now has a reach to the ear area. Okay, so I'm just manipulating these guys. I will leave it as it is now. And before, just one thing about the tactics of using the envelopes. It's better if you are reviewing the bones in a quite quick pace. So if you're spending too much time on adjusting one bone, a single bone, if you have not much experience, it is quite a confusing stuff, because whenever you are adjusting something, the next one will need a different type of adjustment. So it's better if you're just walking through all the bones, make some tiny adjustments, then walking again and working in iterations. So in this case, I'm working it on this way, so the iteration manner, and that's instantly needs to be adjusted. So this one. And when I'm done with the adjustments of the shoulder bone, I will check again the neck. And as you see, the neck is also changing. The neck is updating because right now these vertices are really tied to the neck bone. Okay, and this is what I was looking for. So I have the shoulder part, and the shoulder part is tying down and bending the vertices around the bottom part. Neck is neck, absolutely. The jaw is quite close to its own original limitation range. So this means we have less to worry when dealing with the mouth part. Okay, so these are the envelopes. Now this is the first level of adjusting anything in skinning. Now the second level is using weights or painting weights. The third level is adjusting weights with the weight tool. That's closer to the core. And the fourth way, the deepest solution, if we have the particular point and we have a scheme or schedule to adjust all the points. Just let me quickly show this before we are moving on the next part of painting the weights. So the last option to edit these is if we are opening up the weight table. Now whenever you are selecting a vertex, each vertices has its own code ID. No matter where or what you are selecting, you have this kind of a code. So as you see, we have all the bones here, and this is one of the reasons why we like to rename the bones, so not leaving them as bone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the bones are working in our case. And as you see, there's a first set of vertices are influenced by the head bone. But as we are moving on, some vertices are influenced by the jawbone as well, and some influenced by the neck as well. So we have some kind of an overlap. Now, when you are dealing with the envelopes, you don't have to worry about these overlaps. You're actually using the graphics. You're using this red and blue areas to recognize that, okay, that bone is influencing the red areas. So if something turns to blue, that's okay with me. That means that is not in the equation. So we don't have to worry about that one. But it is quite a mess to use this one. It could be quite slow to use. Of course, sometimes if you have to adjust something very meticulously, you can do that, but it's not a necessity. Now, an easier way, instead of adjusting numbers, is to paint the weights. Now, but before we are actually dealing with painting the weights, let us test what we just did. So I will leave the skin, and don't forget, we have the controllers available, but these are just turned off. So display is just turned off because already have what? We already have animation. So this is what we will do. We need to make the corrections. Now, how to do that? First, just let me check the movements of the head. So I will select the head, going in envelope, and this is the reason why we are using the slider, because even if you are within editing mode, where you are in subobject mode, you can still use the slider, so you don't have to exit, turn the head, rotate the head. It is much easier and much more interactive if you can use this one. Now here's the head that we have, and we will use the paint weights. Now paint weights working, just let me quickly show how paint weights is designed. So paint weights, now I've turned on, so it is running. As you see, I have this 3D brush shown. But when you want to adjust the settings, you have to open up the painter options. Now this painter option is, if you are using it with a mouse, it will be quite drastical. Now to avoid that, we will use a max strength that is a little bit lower. So I will use 0. or 0,2 for example. Now just let me quickly start painting it. Okay, because blend weights is on, blend weights is calculating gradient weights. Just let me quickly show what it is actually. So when you are turning off paint blend weights, this max strength will affect the area whatever you do. So I'm making a hold and I start painting. Now when you have a low value, you can click multiple times, and then it means you can add on influence to the bone. Now when you have paint blend weights, it acts like a blur tool. So you have a highly influenced red vertex here and a less influenced vertex, for example, here. But when you start painting between those, this color will indicate that you have some kind of a gradient change. These gradient changes are important for repairs. For example, here we have a quite drastic stretch. Now in this area I can even increase the strength to 1, and I can start using these paint weights, blend weights. Okay, but if I'm not satisfied with the results, I can go back, make a low maximum strength, paint weight blend weights is not turned on, and I can add influence by hitting these points. And once I have this basic setup, this one is not that important, so I will use Alt key to invert. and then going back to paint blend weights, adjusting the max strength to 1 or even 2 when paint blend weights turn on, and then as you see I can just adjust this gradient to make it a little bit softer. Alright, so this is one way to make the corrections. If you are using Ctrl and Shift, you can resize your brush. If you're using, this is actually the size value here, the max size. If you're using Shift and Alt, you can increase or decrease strength on the fly. Okay, so Control Shift, it will increase the overall, and Control and Shift Alt will increase and decrease the strength value. Now I will use paint blend weights. We use a higher strength and make the changes here. So add more blend. Okay. Now turning back it lower and removing it's even higher. Okay, 0.1 is fine. Right, now what we have here is we want to move on to the next bone, so I'm turning off paint weights, select the jawbone, and the jawbone might have a better influence around this area, so this is why I will add more. Okay, paint weights and adding more to it. Okay, so this will belong, this will be quite strong, and I will also add to the mouth part, and as you see the vertices will be mirrored. So in this case I'm not worried about the symmetry because I will mirror the skin effect. So what I will focus, I'm focusing only on the one side, and by using Alt key I can remove from this top part, make it smaller and remove more. Paint blend weights is not on, so it's not turned on. Now I will increase back the size using paint blend weights and add more strength to make it smoother and better in this case. Okay, this jaw, like it or not, it has some influence on the neck area, so especially at the throat. So it is fine, it is okay if we have some influence. I will remove it here because I don't want to affect that much, but I like the effect of this one. Okay, so yeah, there's here we have some problems, so I will remove the effect by using Alt. Okay, so I'm using Alt to remove the effect. Now just let me quickly test it. Right, here we still have some influence. Okay, so some of the bones still have some influence. Maybe this is the head, so I'm selecting the head now, going back to the paint weights, starting, and yes, and probably it is using the Alt key. Okay, now it's quite fine. So the movement is quite nice. Here the gel is working pretty fine. To add some corrections, I will add the lip. So we'll turn off paint blend weight mode because I want a strong brush, not a blend. And max strength is pretty much high, so I will add, okay, just have to be careful because I don't want to affect the lower lip that much. Change the angles, make it smaller. Okay, probably I have to move on and make it even smaller and use Alt key to remove these guys from the equation, so I don't want that yellowish tone. And that's right, now take a look. Yeah, the neck still needs some work, so the neck will need some added tuning, but the head part is okay. Now I will just leave the skinning mode and test the jaw. Shift S to holding on and turn on animation. We have no keys for the jaw, but I will do a simple open up. So from 0 to 5 it will open up. Switching to rotation, I want to rotate it a little bit nicer than this one, so I will switch to local mode. Opening up in local mode, right? Okay, and it's quite believable. So this is quite believable. The only problem is, of course, we have to repair the mouth part, so that will be useful stuff. Now, to don't get too much opening of the mouth at the early stage, I will select all these keys and move them to the last section of the animation. So when the head is already rotated, then the mouth will open up. Okay, and that's right. So that's this one is the first part of the skinning, and the second part of the skinning will be about how to use the vertex options and how to adjust them manually one by one. But it really takes some time to discover all the chances and all the techniques that you can work with skinning, and it is really time consuming. So this is one of the reasons why it's a good idea to use as low polygons as you can and keep them tidy, keep them easy to select, make no too many overlaps and similar issues. But this is for now, and the next is coming up. Thank you. Goodbye.